Good morning, everyone. Salam alaikum. My name is Stefan Amarani. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Renogen Limited, and I was really looking forward to being there in person. Unfortunately, circumstances dictated I needed to be in South Africa, where our project is. Without further ado, the floor is mine for the next 25 minutes or so, and I'm going to be telling you about the Virginia gas project in South Africa, which is Renogen's primary asset. So, without further ado, let us move on to the presentation at hand. So, for those of you that aren't already aware, I'd assume that by this stage of the conference, everyone knows where helium is used, but the screen in front gives you a little bit of an overview of just how many of our lives, and how many aspects of all of our lives helium truly touches. Right through from your cell phone, from the computer that you use, your laptop, televisions, absolutely every piece of electronics that ever used a microchip. That microchip was produced with helium. The airbags in your car that keep you safe, rocket launchers, MRIs, manufacturing as well as the operating of MRIs, and the list goes on and on. And the companies presented in this slide over here literally just give you a little bit of a snapshot, and you would have to be living under a rock somewhere not to know at least a handful of these companies. And so you can see that helium is quite an important little commodity, and a commodity that is certainly growing in terms of both its popularity and global recognition with regards to its uses. Who is Renogen? So Renogen was the world's first listed helium company. We listed back in 2015. Doesn't mean that we were the first to produce helium. That obviously took place long time ago. But as a primary helium producer, Renogen listed firstly on the JSE in 2015 in Johannesburg, and then later on in Australia with an IPO in 2019. The asset that we hold is in South Africa. It's about 187,000 hectares, and it is the first and only onshore petroleum production right in the whole of South Africa. It was the first when we acquired the asset back in 2012, and to this date, it is still the first and only onshore petroleum production right. Now, this gives us significant inroads in the country. It makes us first producer, not only the first producer of liquid helium in sub-Saharan Africa, but more importantly, the byproduct of our helium mining happens to be methane, and which we produce LNG from. And so as of September 2022, we started producing LNG, which made us the first commercial producer and distributor of LNG in South Africa. And that obviously gives us a significant head start over many of the other energy companies that see South Africa as a potential hub for distribution of LNG. We believe that we've got this head start at least for the next 3 to 5 years, while the rest of the importers attempt to get the infrastructure right to bring LNG into the country. And it's going to be many years before any of the other onshore petroleum producers get their projects into a point where they're either funded or they have LNG facilities online. And so that gives us a unique head start in the country, which is, as you've seen from the press, particularly energy strapped. We have all sorts of challenges with respect to energy, from load shedding, which was a coin termed in South Africa because of continuous power outages, all the way through to the fact that the diesel refineries have either been disposed of or shut down. We can't import LNG, and then obviously the major gas supplier in South Africa, being Sasol, who gets all of its gas from the pipeline from Mozambique, announced that in 2026 it's going to be curtailing gas. So South Africa is headed to what we call a gas cliff, and that gas cliff presents a unique opportunity for us as the first and only onshore petroleum producer producing LNG in the country, especially at a time when South Africa is also looking to make its transition from being 84% coal-based electricity generation over towards cleaner sources. So what is it that Renogen offers? Firstly, we've got one of the world's highest concentrations of helium, which means that the carbon footprint of our helium is particularly low. Now, let me just stress, that doesn't mean that our helium is more valuable than anyone else's helium. Liquid helium is liquid helium. And that needs to be clearly understood. There is no such concept as green helium. But suffice it to say, when you have a concentration as high as ours, it means that the carbon footprint associated with that helium is significantly lower. And that in and of itself is something that is valuable to some customers. They won't pay a premium for it, but it is something that is valuable to some customers. And so from that perspective, if you had to take a snapshot of what the aggregate helium concentrations are across the major producers in the world, we produce helium. Every 1 ton of our helium has an associated carbon footprint of around 585 to 590 tons. Whereas if you had to look at the USA, it's about 3,900, Qatar, 29,300, give or take. So we're significantly lower in terms of carbon footprint, and that's by virtue of the fact that the concentration of helium in our gas is an extraordinarily high level compared to some of the other major producers. I touched on before the fact that the other associated byproduct of our gas was LNG. The snapshot in South Africa looks quite dire with regards to the production of LNG. You'll see there are obviously headlines from the cutouts at the bottom that we've now called this crisis the gas cliff crisis, which is looming in South Africa, mainly as a result of the fact that the Pandentamane fields in Mozambique have now run dry, or at least are in the process of running dry. You've got a double whammy in the sense that aside from the gas being curtailed by Sasol, you also have a situation where the government is now procuring, at least setting up bids to start procuring electricity from gas generation. Now, if you look at the second cutout on the bottom, you'll see the green over there represents the planned power in the gas utilization master plan of 2024, exactly how much power is being intended from gas sources in South Africa. And that means that in total, we're heading for a shortfall of somewhere in the region of about 250 to 300 petajoules per annum. And when you consider that our phase 2 project only produces somewhere between 10 to 11 petajoules per annum, there's obviously a lot of space for a lot of other participants to come into the market, but that also means that we get significantly favorable pricing. And as a result, we're currently selling LNG to our customers at anywhere from about 16 to 20 US dollars per gigajoule, which is a significant premium over many other markets. What we're doing with our LNG, we're sending it into various markets. One of the things that we are establishing with some of our trucking customers is we're putting up a network. By 2028, we'll have a network of LNG filling stations across the major highways in South Africa, providing LNG to trucks, which will be retrofitted to run on diesel dual fuel, so a combination of both diesel and LNG simultaneously. The benefit over here is a significant reduction in greenhouse gases, which is great for the listed logistics companies who are obviously looking for green sustainability credits, which is obviously a big driver on the JSE, where many of them are listed. But then by the same token, we also sell the LNG at a pegged price to diesel, at a discount to diesel. So overall, they get significant savings in their running costs. So from their perspective, it's a no-brainer. Significantly cheaper running costs, and you get greenhouse gas reduction, which overall is just better for the company. And that's starting to gain significant traction in South Africa. It's not a new concept. I believe Total announced at some point that they had 750 stations in the US. I know Italy run lots of trucks on LNG. Brazil does. Southeast Asia, China for the first time announced that I believe that the demand for LNG trucks now outstrips diesel trucks. And so this is a growing theme where for long-haul battery electric simply isn't going to work for the kinds of distances that we're talking and for the kinds of payloads that we need to carry. And so LNG becomes the immediate alternative to show significant reduction in greenhouse gases. All right, so I've done a lot of talking about the South African macro. To give you an idea of what it is that we have, we call our project the Virginia Gas Project. So Renogen holds the Virginia Gas Project through its subsidiary called Tetra 4. So Renogen holds 94.5% of Tetra 4. Tetra 4 is then further 5.5% held by a domestic private equity firm called Atlaco Gas. And then Tetra 4 has the Virginia Gas Project, which is where our project comes from. And then obviously we've got exploration rights in Evander as well. Board, we adhere to the highest level of governance structures. JSE is governed by King 4, the King 4 Code, which was drafted by Lord Mervyn King, who then also, after drafting the King 4 Code in South Africa, went and set it up for the FTSE in the UK as well. So we've got all of the relevant committees, and we do all of the relevant reporting from a governance structure. Aside from myself and Nick Mitchell, who are the two founders of the business who acquired the petroleum production right back in 2012, another key notable figure on the board is Dr. David King, an Australian resident who has, over the course of his career, founded and listed and sold off 3 oil and gas exploration companies. So he brings with him an incredible wealth of knowledge on the development of early upstream oil and gas projects. Our business is fully vertically integrated. Being a first mover in South Africa, it's meant that we have had to vertically integrate our business, and as a result, we have 4 primary business pillars. Business pillar number 1 is obviously liquid helium. The project is being built in 2 phases. We call phase 1 and phase 2, very original name over there. We spent a lot of time delineating the difference between phase 1 and 2. So phase 1 has already been pre-sold. All of that helium is gone. That was funded with cash that was given to us by the United States government in a loan through the DFC. Phase 2, 50% has been committed under take or pay. The other 50% is designated for the spot market, and that is also being funded through the DFC. And the US government committed and signed off in Congress a loan of $500 million, which will go towards the construction of the phase 2 project, which we believe will be online sometime in 2028. That's the first business pillar. The second business pillar is obviously LNG, which is used for gas to power. There are many gas to power opportunities to explore in South Africa, and we're assessing which of those makes the most sense, but don't need to dwell too much on the fact that South Africa is a massive energy user and very desperately short on power. LNG for industrial users, this is the like of, we've got Ardagh as an existing customer. Ardagh is paper and packaging, and they're using it for bottles for tasty beverages. We've also got Itatal, a massive ceramic manufacturer, I believe the biggest in Africa. They're using it obviously in the baking process of their tiles. And there are a number of customers in South Africa that use gas for thermal purposes. The customers that we target are those that are not currently on the Sasol pipeline. In other words, you need virtual pipelines to get the gas to their operations, hence the need for LNG. The third business pillar under the LNG, but the fourth business pillar in the business, is liquid fuel substitution for trucks, which I've already touched on. And we have a wellhead to tank model. So in other words, we take the gas out the ground and it goes all the way through into the customer's tank, which we dispense for them through a series of filling stations. So to give you an idea of the size of the overall project from a resources perspective, now I need to give you a little bit of an idea as to just how big it is that we're looking at on the helium side. So everyone is aware of the existence of the BLM in the United States. The BLM is the Bureau of Land Management. It's the US federal helium system, which was stockpiled over many decades, and it had been auctioning off helium on a regular basis. And I'm sure you'll hear a lot more about the BLM at the conference. The estimates as to how much helium is left in the BLM at the moment is around 7 billion cubic feet. Now you look at our 1P, 2P, 3P reserves, where 1P is proven, probable, and then 3P is possible. And that's just in your reserves. Our 1P already exceeds the United States' federal helium system. Now, to give you an idea of just how big our overall project is, our 3P, which is 20 billion cubic feet, or approximately 3 times bigger than the United States' federal helium system, only represents 14% of our acreage. So if you have to look at our C's and our U's as well, you come to astonishingly large figures, probably close to between 50 to 60 billion cubic feet of helium, and at exceptionally high concentrations, which means that there's a very, very small amount of LNG that you have to evacuate in order to produce exceedingly large quantities of helium. So the project is incredibly scalable. It's probably one of the more scalable projects across the world right now from a helium perspective. Methane is obviously significantly more modest. If you had to look at us at a 2P level, which is kind of where the equity markets look at us, That's only in the region of around zero point 0.4 TCF. So again, very small, not significant by any measure. However, when it's costing you very little to get out of the ground because our drilling is exceptionally cheap, and you're managing to sell your LNG at anywhere from between 16 to 20 US dollars per gigajoule, even zero point 0.4 TCF becomes quite a meaningful number from a business perspective. How did the gas get there? It's probably one of the cooler geological stories. It was probably one of the very few places in the world where two asteroids hit the world at the same place. The first asteroid was about 3.8 billion years ago. That was during a period called the Great Bombardment, and that brought a huge amount of uranium down to Earth. And so there's now a sedimentary deposit called the Dominion Group, where we are in South Africa. And that's about 5 kilometers thick, and it has uraninite at a concentration of around 10 kilograms per ton. Now, just to put that in context, a viable mine would be somewhere between 5 to 10 grams per ton. Here you've got a 5 kilometer thick layer with uraninite of up to 10 kilograms per ton. So with that much uranium, obviously there's a huge amount of radioactive decay, and the radioactive decay is producing all of this helium. The second asteroid struck about 2 billion years ago, and you can see in the cutout on the right over there, the impact crater. It was the largest asteroid ever to have hit the world. It struck around 2 billion years ago in a place called Vredefort, and that's now a UNESCO heritage site called the Vredefort Dome. In that cutout, the crater is the dark brown, except for the red blob at the bottom. The red blob at the bottom is the Virginia Gas Project, which we own. That Virginia Gas Project is the site of where we've put our project, where we get our helium from, and essentially the result of all of this combined geology that has resulted in the project being what it is. Just as an anecdote, what makes the project super interesting from a methane perspective is that the uranium, the second asteroid, resulted in quite a unique situation where archaeobacteria was trapped underground. It evolved. And as opposed to archaeobacteria, which species rely on the sun in order to be able to get their energy to metabolize carbon, this bacteria evolved to work off the alpha decay of the uranium to be able to produce, or to take in its energy in order to be able to then process the carbon. And so what we found in our field is that we've got wells that were drilled in 1957 and they blow more gas today than they did in 1957. All of our wells, the experience that we've had so far is that all of our wells have increased in production over time. And so as a result, the South African government declared our project renewable because there's a living bacterial colony down there that is metabolizing the carbon in the rock into methane, which is then coming up to the surface in the wells. And it's obviously co-mingling with the methane. Now, let me be clear that the helium is not regenerating. That is done. The helium that's there is the helium that's there. But the methane is regenerating, and that makes this quite an exciting project, both from a climate change perspective, given the fact that this is a renewable resource, as well as from the fact that the concentrations of helium, you'll see from the cutout at the bottom, really put us in a completely different category relative to any of the other major nations that produce helium. I touched on the fact that we've got a phase 1 and a phase 2. Way back when we listed back in 2015, we were asked by shareholders to build a small proof of concept to show that we could run transport on natural gas. So we built a tiny little CNG plant that was successful. We then moved on to phase 1. Phase 1 was the true test case from the US government. They said, build a small phase 1 project, produce liquid helium, and then you'll get the funding for phase 2. We did that. We built it. It's a tiny, tiny little test case, 2,500 gigajoules of LNG per day, which is give or take about 50 tons a day. So it's tiny, and around 300 kilograms of helium per day, or about 75 MCF again. Nothing to write home about. It's very small, but it works, and that's the key thing. Phase 2 is where the real magic starts to happen. Phase 2 is about just under 900 MCF of liquid helium per day, which makes it somewhere between 6 to 8% of the world's current supply. It's 34,400 gigajoules of LNG per day, or call it somewhere in the region of about 700 tons a day. Total build of the project is a little bit under $1.2 billion. If you round up, it's $1.2 billion. Funded $500 million from the USDFC, $250 million from Standard Bank, and now we're in the process of IPOing on the Nasdaq, which should be early next year. To give you an idea of some key comparables out there, just so that you get a rough feel for what helium underground is valued at the moment. BLM recently sold 2 billion cubic feet of gas underground, and they sold that at $353 million. New Era is a SPAC which is de-SPACing with a Roth SPV. They have a 2 billion cubic foot reserve at a 2P level, and the intended de-SPAC is at $135 million market cap, which would be about $67.5 million per BCF for gas underground. Our transaction that we did with our private equity firm was for 550 million rand. In real money, that's about $36 million US dollars. Their entitlement is around 0.75 BCF of helium. Now, when you take those numbers and then you compare them to our 2P ratio, which is around 13.6 billion cubic feet of helium, our implied valuation would be, using the pricing of the BLM, $918 million. The New Era de-SPAC, $884 million, and using the Matlakon number of $497 million. So it'll be interesting to see when we list on the Nasdaq, the kind of valuations that we pick up in the US, who we believe are going to be far more adept at valuing the asset than is currently available on the JSE, where we are the first and only onshore petroleum production right holder, and so no one has ever seen a gas company in South Africa before. But we're quietly optimistic and confident that we're going to have a significant re-rate. Of course, that's just public speak and public speculation. I'm not sharing anything over here that isn't in the public domain already. So that is our project in a nutshell. I hope that the rest of the conference is so. Not entirely sure what happened over there. Unfortunately, I got cut off for the last 30 seconds. However, let me say that I wish everyone a very successful conference. I hope lots of deals get done. I hope you all contribute towards pushing the global economy forward and towards helping the energy transition take shape. And I really look forward to attending the conference next year, circumstances permitting. Should any of you wish to reach out, I'm pretty sure that my contact details will be in the marketing materials on that side. Don't hesitate to reach out. You've got my number, you've got my email address. If you want to hear anything more about the Virginia Gas Project, let me know. And I wish you all a very good day further. Thank you very much.